The storm came without warning that night in Nevada. Lightning split the dark sky as rain poured down on the empty desert. Colonel Jake Morrison was driving back to base when he saw something impossible. A massive shape fell from the clouds, burning like a falling star but far too large to be a meteor dot. The crash shook the ground for miles. Jake grabbed his radio and called it in. Within an hour, military trucks surrounded the site. What they found changed everything. The ship was enormous, nearly 2 miles long and made of metal that gleamed even in the darkness. It had clearly been damaged before landing. Huge tears ran along its side, and strange liquid leaked from broken sections. The design was unlike anything humans had ever built. Curved surfaces flowed into sharp angles in ways that hurt to look at. Dr. Lisa Parker arrived with the science team at dawn. She was one of the world's best experts on ancient civilizations, though she had never expected to study an alien one. As she approached the massive vessel, her hands shook with excitement and fear. The ship had no obvious doors or windows. The metal felt warm to the touch and seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Jake ordered his men to search for an entrance while Lisa took readings with every instrument she had. They found an opening on the third day. A section of the hull had buckled inward, creating a gap just wide enough for people to squeeze through. Jake insisted on going first, with Lisa close behind. Inside, the ship was a maze of corridors that curved in impossible directions. Emergency lighting cast everything in a blue glow. The walls were covered in symbols that meant nothing to human eyes. Some areas were flooded with that strange liquid they had seen outside. They found the first alien in what looked like a control room. It was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. Its eyes were closed and it breathed in short, painful gasps. When it saw the humans, it tried to speak. The words sounded like music mixed with static. Lisa recorded everything while Jake tried to communicate through hand gestures. The alien seemed to understand that they meant no harm. More aliens were found throughout the ship. All were dying from their injuries. The ship's medical equipment had failed, and the creatures were too weak to repair it. Lisa counted 12 aliens in total, though she suspected there had been more. The alien in the control room seemed to be their leader. It pointed to various screens and displays, making urgent sounds. Lisa realized it was trying to tell them something important. She brought in every translator and computer expert she could find. On the 5th day, they made a breakthrough. Dr. Peter Cole, a language specialist, discovered that some of the alien symbols were mathematical. Using basic math as a starting point, he began to decode simple concepts. The process was slow and frustrating, but progress came in small steps. The alien leader, who they learned was named something like Zethon, managed to communicate basic ideas. The ship was called the Void's Edge. They were called the Kethvar, and they had been running from something terrible. Through a combination of gestures, symbols, and broken translations, Zethon told them about the Devourers. They were machines that consumed entire worlds, turning everything into more of themselves. The Kethvar had fought them for centuries, but they always lost in the end. Zeth Aeon showed them star maps on the ship's damaged displays. System after system was marked with a symbol that meant consumed or dead. The pattern was clear. The Devourers were working their way across the galaxy, and Earth was in their path. The Void's Edge had been one of the last Kethvar ships. It carried their most powerful weapon, something that could actually hurt the Devourers. But the ship was dying, just like its crew. The power core was destroyed, the weapons were offline, and most of the important systems had failed. Zeth Aeon died on the 7th day. Before the end, the alien pressed a small device into Lisa's hands. Through the translator, it managed one final message. The weapon could be rebuilt, but only if humans could understand the technology. Earth's only hope was to learn from the wreckage and prepare for the coming storm. The other aliens died over the next few days. Each death felt like losing a library of knowledge that could never be recovered. Lisa worked frantically to record everything she could, but so much was lost. World leaders held emergency meetings when they learned what had happened. Some wanted to destroy the ship, afraid that studying it would attract the devourers. Others argued that it was their only chance to survive. After weeks of debate, they decided to try. Project Prometheus was born in secret. The world's best scientists, engineers, and military experts were brought to the Nevada site. Dr. Amanda Wells was chosen to lead the project. She was brilliant, determined, and understood the stakes better than anyone. The first challenge was simply understanding what they were looking at. The HFY technology was far beyond human science. Materials that should not exist were somehow stable. Energy patterns that made no sense according to physics worked perfectly. Every day brought new mysteries and few answers. Jake was put in charge of security for the project. He made sure the site stayed hidden from the world while protecting the scientists inside. The work was slow and dangerous. Several researchers were injured when they tried to activate alien systems without understanding them. Lisa became the team's expert on HFY culture and language. She studied every symbol, every recording, every piece of information the aliens had left behind. Slowly, she began to understand their history and their technology. The Devourers had been machines, once created by a species that had died out long ago. They had been designed to explore and learn, but something had gone wrong. They became obsessed with consumption, turning everything they encountered into extensions of themselves. They had been spreading across the galaxy for thousands of years. The Void's edge weapon was called a reality manipulator. It could change the laws of physics in a small area, making it possible to hurt beings that existed partially outside normal space. The HFY had built only a few such weapons, and they had all been destroyed except for this one. But the weapon was useless without power, and the power system was completely alien to human understanding. Worse, it required a neural interface that was designed for HFY minds. A human brain could not handle the connection without being destroyed. As the first year of study ended, the team had learned much but solved little. They knew what the weapon could do but not how to make it work. They understood the threat but had no way to fight it. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Devourers continued their slow advance toward Earth. The real work was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the Void's Edge crashed in Nevada. The secret base had grown into a small city underground, filled with the brightest minds from every nation on Earth. Dr. Amanda Wells walked through the research levels every morning, checking on progress that came in tiny steps. Dr. Kevin Hart had been staring at the same alien power conduit for 3 months. He was a quantum physicist who had won awards for his work on energy theory. But HFY technology made him feel like a child, trying to understand calculus. The conduit was no bigger than a human hand, yet it had once carried enough power to run a small city. The metal was impossible according to everything humans knew about materials science. It conducted energy without resistance, stored massive amounts of power without heating up, and somehow channeled forces that their instruments could barely detect. Kevin had taken it apart molecule by molecule and put it back together dozens of times. On a Tuesday morning in March, everything clicked. Kevin realized that the HFY did not think about energy the same way humans did. They did not move power from one place to another. Instead, they convinced space itself to create energy where they needed it. The conduit was not a wire but a reality anchor that kept the process stable. In the materials lab, engineer Susan Blake was having her own breakthrough. She had been trying to recreate the hull metal for years, mixing every element and compound she could think of. The HFY hull was stronger than diamond but lighter than aluminum. It could repair small damage by itself, and seemed to get stronger when hit with energy weapons. Susan discovered that the secret was not in what the metal was made of, but in how it was made. The HFY had built their materials, one atom at a time, placing each piece exactly where it needed to be. They did not forge or mold metal. They convinced matter to arrange itself into the shapes they wanted. Using human technology, Susan found ways to copy the process. It was slow and expensive, but she could make small amounts of the hull material in her lab. Each piece took days to grow, but the results were exactly like the original alien metal. Dr. Peter Cole spent his time in a room filled with alien writings. The walls were covered with symbols, translations, and connecting lines that looked like the work of someone going insane. Peter had cracked the basic language years ago, but the technical manuals were far more complex. The HFY did not write instructions the way humans did. They embedded their knowledge in stories, poems, and philosophical discussions. To understand how to repair a power system, Peter had to read an epic tale about the marriage of energy and matter. Weapon specifications were hidden in religious texts about the nature of destruction and creation. Slowly, Peter began to see the patterns. The HFY had been warriors and poets at the same time. Their technology was as much art as science. Every system on their ship had been designed to reflect their deepest beliefs about the universe. The reality manipulator was their masterpiece. Peter found references to it scattered throughout their literature. They called it the Song of Unmaking, a tool that could rewrite the laws of physics by convincing reality that different rules applied. The weapon did not destroy enemies so much as make them impossible. But the more Peter learned, the more worried he became. The reality manipulator required a level of mental connection that would kill a human brain instantly. The HFY had spent generations modifying their own minds to handle the interface. They had changed themselves as much as they had changed their technology. Dr. Amanda Wells gathered the team leaders in her office every Friday to share discoveries and plan next steps. The news was always mixed. They understood more about HFY technology each week, but they also realized how far they still had to go. In the 5th year, they detected the first signs that the Devourers were getting closer. Radio telescopes picked up strange signals from distant star systems. The signals followed the same pattern every time. First came warnings and calls for help. Then silence. Dr. Kevin Hart calculated the Devourers' speed based on which systems went quiet and when. At their current pace, they would reach Earth in 15 to 20 years. It sounded like a long time, but rebuilding the reality manipulator would take decades with current technology. Amanda made a difficult decision. She authorized live testing of partially understood alien systems. The risk was enormous. People could be killed or driven insane. Equipment worth billions could be destroyed. But waiting was not an option anymore. Alex Turner volunteered for the first neural interface test. He was young, brilliant with computers, and had no family to worry about. Alex had studied every piece of information about HFY mental modification and believed he could survive the connection. The test took place in a heavily shielded room deep underground. Alex wore a helmet connected to a small piece of alien neural interface technology. Doctors monitored every vital sign while Peter Cole stood ready to cut the connection if anything went wrong. When Alex activated the interface, his body went rigid. His brain pattern shifted into configurations that had never been seen in humans. For 17 minutes, he was connected to a fragment of the Void's Edge computer system. When they disconnected him, Alex was unconscious and bleeding from his nose and ears. He spent 3 weeks in a coma. When Alex finally woke up, he was changed. He could remember being inside the alien computer, feeling the ship's systems like extensions of his own body. The experience had burned out part of his mind, leaving him with permanent damage, but he had proven that humans could survive the interface. More importantly, Alex had brought back data. During those 17 minutes, he had downloaded years' worth of technical specifications directly into his brain. The information was fragmented and hard to access, but it was genuine HFY engineering knowledge. Using Alex's memories as a guide, the team began their first serious attempts to rebuild alien technology with human materials. They could not copy everything exactly, but they could create similar effects using different methods. Susan Blake's hull metal became the foundation for new armor plating. Kevin Hart's energy systems powered experimental weapons that bent light and twisted gravity. Peter Cole's translations provided the theoretical framework that made it all possible. By the end of the 5th year, they had built their first hybrid device. It was a power cell no bigger than a briefcase that could run the entire research base for a month. The cell used human fusion technology guided by HFY physics to create energy from nothing. Amanda Wells stood in her office, looking at reports from every department. The progress was real but painfully slow. They understood the principles behind the reality manipulator, but building one would require technology that did not exist yet. Outside, the world continued as normal. People went to work, raised families, and worried about ordinary problems. They had no idea that their survival depended on a few hundred scientists working in a hole in the Nevada desert. The devourers were still years away, but Amanda could feel time running out. They needed breakthroughs, not just progress. They needed miracles, not just science. Most of all, they needed people willing to sacrifice everything for a chance to save their species. Alex Turner visited Amanda that evening. His speech was still slurred from brain damage, and he moved like an old man despite being only 30 years old. But his eyes were bright with purpose. He told Amanda that the neural interface was not the problem. The problem was thinking like humans instead of thinking like HFY. The aliens had spent centuries preparing their minds for the connection. Humans would have to change themselves just as much as they changed the technology. Amanda looked at the young man who had given his sanity for a few minutes of alien knowledge. She wondered how many more people would have to make similar sacrifices before Earth was safe. The answer, she suspected, was all of them. The decision to rebuild the Void's Edge came after 10 years of study and testing. Dr. Amanda Wells stood before a joint session of world leaders, presenting plans that would cost more than most nations' entire budgets and require cooperation on a scale never before seen in human history. General Nathan Brooks had been chosen to oversee the military aspects of the project. He was a practical man who understood that fancy technology meant nothing without the ability to use it in battle. Nathan looked at the massive alien ship and saw not just a weapon, but a fortress that would need to be defended, supplied, and operated by human crews. The first challenge was simply moving the ship. The Void's Edge had been built in space and was never meant to land on a planet. Its own weight was crushing the internal structures that had survived the crash. They needed to get it back into orbit, but the ship was far too large for any human spacecraft to carry. Dr. Kevin Hart proposed using the ship's own technology against gravity. The HFY had built gravitational manipulators into the hull that could make the massive vessel weightless. The systems were damaged but not destroyed. With careful repairs and human power sources, they might be able to lift the ship back into space. The repair work took 2 years. Teams of engineers worked inside the ship 24 hours a day, replacing alien components with human equivalents wherever possible. Susan Blake's hull metal was used to patch holes and strengthen weak sections. The fusion reactors that Kevin had designed were installed in empty cargo bays, connected to the ship's power grid through miles of new cables. Dr. Michelle Garcia joined the project to work on the biological aspects of the neural interface. She was an expert in genetics and brain chemistry who had spent years studying how the mind worked. Michelle knew that humans would never be able to use HFY neural technology without changing themselves first. The solution came from an unexpected source. Alex Turner, still struggling with the brain damage from his interface test, suggested that they were thinking about the problem backwards. Instead of changing humans to work with alien technology, they should change the technology to work with human minds. Michelle began developing a new type of neural interface that combined human brain patterns with HFY mental frameworks. It was like teaching 2 different species to speak the same language. The process required gene therapy, surgical implants, and months of mental conditioning, but it could allow a human consciousness to control alien systems without being destroyed. Captain Ryan Clark volunteered to be the first test subject for the complete neural interface. He was an Air Force pilot with perfect reflexes and exceptional spatial reasoning abilities. More importantly, Ryan had no family and no fear of death. He understood that he might not survive the process, but he was determined to try. The preparation took 6 months. Michelle's team modified Ryan's genetic structure to make his neurons more compatible with alien technology. Surgeons implanted microscopic devices throughout his brain that would help translate human thoughts into HFY commands. Ryan spent hours each day in simulation chambers, learning to think in ways that felt completely unnatural. When the Void's Edge was finally lifted back into orbit, Ryan was ready for the full interface connection. The ship hung in space like a wounded giant, surrounded by human construction vessels and supply ships. Inside, the command center had been rebuilt with human technology guided by alien design principles. The neural interface chair looked more like a medical device than a pilot seat. Ryan lay back as technicians connected dozens of cables to the implants in his brain. Amanda Wells watched from the observation deck, knowing that they were about to discover if 10 years of work had been worth the effort. When Ryan activated the interface, the change was immediate and dramatic. His consciousness expanded to fill the entire ship. He could feel every system, every power conduit, every weapon as if they were parts of his own body. The sensation was overwhelming, but not painful. For the first time since the crash, the void's edge was truly alive. Ryan's voice came through the communication system, but it sounded different. There was an echo to it, as if he was speaking from a great distance. He reported that all systems were responding normally, and that the ship was ready for testing. The rebuilt vessel was no longer purely alien. Human innovations had been integrated throughout the ship's systems. The power core used fusion reactors and antimatter containment fields that could generate more energy than the original HFY design. The weapons had been upgraded with human targeting systems and ammunition feeds that could sustain much longer battles. Most importantly, the reality manipulator had been redesigned to work with human neural patterns. It was smaller than the original, but potentially more powerful. Instead of requiring a single mind to control everything, it could be operated by multiple people working together, sharing the mental load to prevent brain damage. General Brooks supervised the installation of additional human systems throughout the ship. Swarm missile launchers were added to provide conventional firepower, alongside the exotic alien weapons. Plasma cannons were mounted at strategic points to handle smaller enemies. The hull was reinforced with Susan's new metal alloy, and equipped with adaptive armor that could change its properties based on incoming threats. The ship's AI system was completely rebuilt using human computer technology enhanced with HFY processing methods. Unlike the original alien intelligence, the new system could learn and evolve during combat. It would analyze enemy tactics in real time and develop new strategies to counter them. As the modifications continued, they gave the ship a new name. The Void's Edge became the Terra's Wrath, representing humanity's determination to protect their world. The ship was no longer just HFY technology operated by humans. It had become something new, a fusion of two civilizations working toward the same goal. Testing began with simple maneuvers around Earth's orbit. Ryan guided the massive ship with thoughts alone, accelerating and turning with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large. The gravitational manipulators allowed the Terra's Wrath to move without regard for normal physics, stopping instantly or changing direction without inertia. Weapon tests came next. The plasma cannons could destroy asteroids the size of buildings with single shots. The missile swarms could track and eliminate hundreds of targets simultaneously. But the real test was the reality manipulator, the weapon that was supposed to be able to hurt the Devourers. The reality manipulator created a sphere of altered space around the ship. Within that sphere, the Terra's Wrath could ignore normal physics while forcing its enemies to obey whatever rules it chose. The first test warped space so severely that light bent into impossible shapes. The second test convinced matter that it was actually energy, causing a small asteroid to simply dissolve into radiation. Ryan reported that controlling the reality manipulator felt like conducting a symphony of physical laws. Every change required perfect timing and complete understanding of what he wanted to achieve. The mental strain was enormous, but he could handle it for short periods without permanent damage. As the Terra's Wrath neared completion, disturbing news came from deep space observatories. The Devourers had consumed 3 more star systems, and their advance was accelerating. What had been a 20-year timeline was now closer to 5 years. The enemy was coming faster than expected. Amanda Wells called an emergency meeting of the project leaders. The Terra's Wrath was powerful beyond anything humans had ever built, but it was still just one ship. The Devourers traveled in fleets of thousands, supported by technology that had consumed entire civilizations. General Brooks suggested building more ships, but the cost and time required made that impossible. Susan Blake proposed mass-producing smaller versions of the human-alien hybrid technology, but that would take years to implement. Michelle Garcia warned that they had only trained one person to use the neural interface. and Ryan was showing signs of mental fatigue from his connection to the ship. The solution came from Ryan himself. During a particularly deep interface session, he discovered something the Kethvar had hidden in their ship's design. The Terra's Wrath was not meant to fight alone. It was designed to coordinate with other vessels, sharing its reality manipulation field with an entire fleet. Human ships could not use alien technology directly, but they could operate within the altered space that the Terra's Wrath created. Inside the reality field, human weapons would be far more effective, while enemy attacks would be weakened or deflected entirely. Earth quote, S space forces began preparing for a battle unlike any in human history. Every available ship was upgraded with the best technology that could be mass-produced from Kethvar designs. Pilots trained in simulators that prepared them for combat in altered space, where normal physics no longer applied. As preparations continued, Ryan spent more and more time connected to the Terra's Wrath. The ship was becoming an extension of his consciousness, and he was becoming part of its systems. Michelle Garcia warned that the process was irreversible, but Ryan insisted that complete integration was necessary to unlock the ship's full potential. The Terra's Wrath hung in Earth's orbit like a guardian angel, its hull gleaming with both alien curves and human modifications. Inside, Ryan. The warning came at 3 a.m. when most of Earth was asleep. Deep space sensors detected massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the solar system. Dr. Amanda Wells was pulled from her bed by emergency calls from observatories around the world. The readings were unlike anything they had seen before, but the pattern was unmistakable. The Devourers had arrived. Captain Ryan Clark felt them before the sensors did. His connection to the Terra's Wrath had grown so deep that he could sense disturbances in space itself. He was floating in the neural interface chamber when reality seemed to shiver around him. Something vast and hungry had entered their solar system, and it was moving toward Earth with terrifying purpose. General Nathan Brooks activated Earth's defense protocols within minutes of the first detection. Military bases around the world went to full alert. Every available spacecraft was launched and formed into defensive formations around Earth and Mars. It was humanity's entire space fleet, over 300 ships representing every nation on the planet. The enemy fleet materialized at the orbit of Neptune like a nightmare taking physical form. The Devourer ships were geometric impossibilities, cubes and spheres and pyramids that seemed to bend space around themselves. They moved without engines, traveling by convincing reality that they were already where they wanted to be. The largest vessels were the size of cities, while swarms of smaller craft filled the space between them. Ryan guided the Terra's Wrath toward the enemy, leading Earth's combined fleet. The human ships looked tiny next to the massive alien vessel, but they carried the best weapons and shields that could be built from hybrid technology. Pilots who had trained for years in impossible combat scenarios now faced the real thing. The first exchange of fire happened near Uranus. A squadron of human fighters engaged a group of smaller Devourer craft to test their capabilities. The results were devastating. Devourer weapons drained energy from anything they touched, turning the power of human shields and engines against them. Within minutes, the entire squadron was destroyed. But the Terra's Wrath proved different. When Devourer beams struck its hull, the energy was absorbed and redirected through the ship's reality manipulation field. Ryan felt each hit like a gentle push rather than a deadly attack. The alien weapon systems that had destroyed human fleets were merely annoying to the rebuilt Kethvar ship. Ryan activated the reality manipulator for the first time in actual combat. Space around the Terra's Wrath became fluid, bending to his will rather than following natural laws. The ship moved like a living thing, dancing between enemy attacks while its own weapons struck with impossible accuracy. The plasma cannons, enhanced by the reality field, tore through Devourer armor that should have been invincible. Missile swarms curved through twisted space to strike targets from directions that did not exist. For the first time in centuries, the Devourers faced a weapon that could actually hurt them. The enemy responded by learning. That was their most terrifying ability. Each time Ryan used a tactic successfully, the Devourers adapted to counter it. Their ships began moving in patterns that made the reality field less effective. Their weapons changed frequency to penetrate the Terra's Wrath's defenses. Dr. Michelle Garcia monitored Ryan's condition from Earth's command center. The neural interface readings showed massive strain on his brain as he pushed the connection beyond safe limits. His body temperature was rising and his heart rate was approaching dangerous levels. But when she suggested reducing the interface power, Ryan refused. The battle raged across the outer solar system for 18 hours. Human ships fought alongside the Terra's Wrath, using the reality field to enhance their weapons, while staying close enough for protection. They managed to destroy dozens of smaller Devourer craft, but the enemy's main fleet remained untouched. As the battle continued, Ryan made a disturbing discovery. The Devourers were not just machines. They were a collective consciousness that grew stronger with each ship they controlled. Every destroyed human vessel added its knowledge to their database. Every tactic Earth used was instantly shared among all enemy units. The turning point came when the largest Devourer ship, a massive pyramid that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, began targeting Earth directly. It fired a beam of pure entropy that aged everything it touched, turning matter into dust across millions of years in seconds. Ryan knew that no human technology could stop such a weapon. He made the choice that Dr. Garcia had been dreading. He opened the neural interface completely, merging his consciousness fully with the Terra's Wrath systems. The process would almost certainly kill him, but it was the only way to access the ship's ultimate capabilities. The transformation was agonizing and beautiful at the same time. Ryan felt his human identity dissolving as he became something larger and more complex. He was no longer just a pilot controlling a ship. He was the ship and the ship was him. Every weapon, every shield, every system became an extension of his will. With his expanded consciousness, Ryan activated the reality manipulator at maximum power. Space around the Terra's Wrath became completely malleable, a region where physical laws were suggestions rather than rules. The ship itself began to change, growing new weapons and defensive systems that materialized from pure thought. The entropy beam struck the reality field and simply stopped existing. Ryan had convinced local space that entropy was impossible, creating a zone where decay and destruction could not happen. The Devourer weapon, designed to destroy anything in the universe, met an area where destruction had been temporarily outlawed. Using his new abilities, Ryan began systematically destroying the enemy fleet. He created gravity wells that crushed Devourer ships, convinced their hulls that they were actually made of paper, and turned their own weapons against them by reversing the flow of causality. The battle became less a fight than a demonstration of what reality manipulation could achieve when used without limits. But the effort was destroying Ryan's human form. His body in the interface chamber was failing as his consciousness spread throughout the ship's systems. Dr. Garcia watched helplessly as his vital signs fluctuated wildly, before finally stabilizing at levels that should have been impossible for human life. The surviving Devourers retreated when their pyramid ship was torn apart by its own gravity. They had never encountered resistance like this, and their collective consciousness needed time to analyze what had happened. As they fled toward the outer system, they transmitted data about the Terra's Wrath to the main Devourer fleet that was still approaching from deep space. Ryan, now permanently fused with the ship, pursued the retreating enemy. His consciousness rode the Terra's Wrath through twisted space, chasing geometric nightmares across the solar system. He destroyed most of the remaining Devourer craft before they could escape, but a few managed to reach the edge of human space. When the battle ended, the Terra's Wrath hung motionless near Jupiter, its hull scarred but intact. Inside, Ryan's body remained connected to the neural interface, but his brain patterns had changed beyond recognition. He was alive but no longer entirely human. Amanda Wells flew to the ship to assess the situation. When she entered the command center, Ryan's voice spoke to her from speakers throughout the room. He sounded tired but alert, and there was something different about the way he spoke. His voice had harmonics that suggested multiple personalities. Speaking in unison, Ryan reported that the retreating Devourers had transmitted Earth's location and defensive capabilities to their main force. The real invasion fleet was still coming, and it would arrive in approximately 6 months. Worse, they now knew about the reality manipulator and would come prepared to counter it. But Ryan also brought hope. His complete integration with the ship had revealed capabilities that even the original Kethavar had never discovered. The Terra's Wrath was not just a weapon, but a catalyst that could fundamentally change how physics worked in local space. With enough time and preparation, they might be able to create a permanent defensive field around Earth. The cost would be enormous. More people would need to undergo the neural interface process, probably giving their humanity in exchange for the power to protect their species. The reality manipulation technology would need to be expanded far beyond anything previously attempted. And they would have to do it all in 6 months while preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of human civilization. Amanda looked at the displays showing Ryan's transformed brain patterns and wondered if victory would be worth the price they were paying. They had gained a powerful weapon, but they were losing the people who operated it. If they survived the coming war, what would humanity have become? Ryan seemed to sense her thoughts. His synthesized voice spoke softly through the ship's communication system, carrying echoes of the pilot he had once been. He told her that some sacrifices were necessary to preserve what mattered most. If losing their humanity was the price of keeping Earth alive, then it was a price worth paying. Outside the command center windows, Earth hung blue and beautiful in the void. On its surface, billions of people continued their lives, unaware that their existence had just been purchased. With the sanity of one man who had chosen to become something else. The first battle was over, but the real war was about to begin. 6 months was not enough time to save the world, but it was the time they had. Dr. Amanda Wells divided Earth's resources between mass production of hybrid technology and preparing new neural interface candidates. Every day brought reports of the approaching Devourer fleet, and every day made it clearer that humanity was about to face an enemy beyond their worst nightmares. Dr. Michelle Garcia worked around the clock to prepare more people for neural interface integration. The process that had nearly killed Ryan Clark was refined and made slightly safer, but it still required candidates to sacrifice much of their humanity. Lieutenant Commander Kelly White was the first to volunteer after Ryan's transformation. Kelly was a brilliant tactical officer who had studied every battle in human history. She understood warfare in ways that went beyond training or instinct. When she emerged from the genetic modification process, her mind had been restructured to think in terms of probability clouds and tactical networks. She could see battle patterns that existed across multiple dimensions of space and time. Major Chris Johnson joined the program next. He was an engineer who could visualize complex systems in his head and solve problems that stumped entire teams of scientists. The neural modifications enhanced his abilities until he could design new technologies just by thinking about them. His consciousness became a living blueprint for innovation and adaptation. The 3 candidates spent weeks learning to link their minds through quantum entanglement fields. The process was like learning to think with multiple brains simultaneously. Ryan's integrated consciousness served as an anchor point, helping Kelly and Chris navigate the mental landscape of the Terra's Wrath systems. When the main Devourer fleet arrived, it filled the space between Mars and Jupiter with thousands of vessels. The enemy had learned from their previous defeat and brought ships specifically designed to counter reality manipulation. Their hulls were covered in geometries that hurt to look at, patterns that convinced space itself to reject the influence of the Terra's Wrath's weapons. General Nathan Brooks commanded the human defense fleet from a fortified position near Earth. He had over 500 ships at his disposal, all upgraded with the best hybrid technology that could be mass-produced. It was an impressive force by human standards, but it looked pathetically small compared to the alien armada bearing down on them. The Devourers had also brought something new, a mothership the size of a small moon. It was not just larger than their other vessels, but fundamentally different. The mothership existed partially outside normal space-time, anchored to reality by massive gravitational generators. It served as a command center for the collective consciousness that controlled the entire fleet. Ryan, Kelly, and Chris prepared for the final battle by merging their consciousness more deeply than ever before. The process was dangerous and irreversible. Once completely linked, they would become a single entity distributed across 3 bodies. Their individual personalities would be subsumed into something larger and more capable. The transformation began as the Devourer fleet entered Earth's orbital space. The 3 interface candidates felt their minds expanding and merging until they could no longer tell where one consciousness ended and another began. They became a trinity of purpose, 3 aspects of a single will dedicated to protecting their species. The merged consciousness immediately understood capabilities that had been hidden in the Terra's Wrath systems. The reality manipulator was not just a weapon, but a tool for fundamental transformation. It could create permanent changes to the structure of space itself, establishing new physical laws that would persist even without the ship's presence. The final battle began with conventional exchanges of fire. Human ships fought desperately against impossible odds while the Terra's Wrath engaged the largest enemy vessels. The Devourers had indeed prepared countermeasures for reality manipulation, but they had not understood the full scope of what the technology could achieve. The Trinity consciousness began the process of establishing a reality barrier around Earth's solar system. It was a transformation that required rewriting the fundamental constants of physics across billions of cubic kilometers of space. The process would take enormous amounts of energy and would likely destroy the Terra's Wrath in the completion. As the barrier began to form, strange effects rippled through the battle zone. Devourer weapons found themselves unable to drain energy from human ships. Enemy vessels that relied on exotic physics to move and fight suddenly became clumsy and vulnerable. The altered space favored human technology while making alien capabilities less effective. The Devourers responded by focusing their entire fleet on destroying the Terra's Wrath before the barrier could be completed. Thousands of ships concentrated their fire on the lone human vessel, unleashing energies that could have destroyed planets. But the Trinity consciousness was ready for them. Instead of trying to avoid the attack, they embraced it. The massive energy discharge was channeled through the reality manipulator and used to accelerate the barrier creation process. The Devourer's own weapons became the power source for their defeat. Their destructive force turned into the foundation of Earth's protection. The process was destroying the 3 interface candidates from the inside out. Their human bodies could not handle the energies flowing through the neural connections, but their consciousness had expanded beyond the need for physical form. They became patterns of thought and will embedded in the structure of space itself. As the reality barrier expanded outward from Earth, it encountered the Devourer mothership. The massive vessel tried to phase out of normal space to avoid the effect, but the Trinity consciousness anticipated this. They had designed the barrier to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating a trap that the mothership could not escape. The collision between the barrier and the mothership created effects that defied description. Reality itself seemed to scream as 2 incompatible versions of physics tried to occupy the same space. The mothership began to tear apart at the molecular level as its exotic matter encountered the human-modified physical laws. With their command center destroyed, the Devourer collective consciousness fragmented into thousands of individual ship minds. Without central coordination, they became vulnerable to conventional attack. The human fleet, now enhanced by the reality barrier's effects, began systematically destroying the enemy vessels. The battle lasted 3 days and spread across the entire solar system. Human ships pursued fleeing Devourers through twisted space, where the normal rules no longer applied. Every enemy vessel that tried to escape found itself slowed by physics that had been rewritten to favor Earth's defenders. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, the reality barrier stabilized into a permanent feature of local space. The solar system was now surrounded by a region where human technology worked better than any alien equivalent. Earth had become the center of a pocket universe with its own unique physical laws. The Trinity consciousness, no longer bound to physical bodies, existed as a distributed intelligence throughout the barrier system. Ryan, Kelly, and Chris had ceased to be individual people and become something new. Guardians whose consciousness spanned light years, and whose purpose was the eternal protection of their species. Dr. Amanda Wells stood in the Terra's Wrath's command center, looking at the empty neural interface chambers where three heroes had given up their humanity to save their world. The ship itself had been transformed by the process, its hull now incorporating elements that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Earth. Quote S. Governments struggled to understand what had happened. They had won the war, but the victory had cost them 3 of their best people and fundamentally changed the nature of space around their planet. Ships trying to leave the solar system found themselves enhanced by the barrier effects, making interstellar travel easier than ever before. Amanda realized that humanity had evolved during the crisis. They were no longer confined to a single world or dependent on naturally occurring physics. The reality barrier made them the dominant force in their region of space, and the hybrid technology gave them tools to spread that dominance further. Within months, human expeditions launched toward other star systems that had been consumed by the Devourers. They carried reality manipulation technology and the knowledge needed to free enslaved worlds. Earth had become the liberating force that the Kethvar had hoped for when they first crashed in the Nevada desert. The Trinity consciousness guided these missions from their distributed existence in the barrier. They could communicate across vast distances instantly and provide tactical support to human forces anywhere in local space. Earth's defenders had become its eternal guardians, their sacrifice ensuring that no enemy would ever again threaten their species. Years later, when the first freed alien civilizations asked how humanity had defeated the Devourers, the answer was simple. They had taken broken alien technology and transformed it with human innovation and determination. They had been willing to sacrifice everything, including their own humanity, to protect what they loved. The Terra's wrath continued to orbit Earth, no longer just a ship, but a monument to what could be achieved when an entire species decided that survival was worth any price. Inside its command center, empty,